A lot of you guys have been requesting us to different variations of this, but a lot of you have asked us to talk about which films set in which cities have recurrent themes. So if you notice, Hollywood definitely has certain cities that it likes to put movies in, and they always seem to have a similar concept to them. So the way that we did this is we broke down, we didn't get every film and we didn't get every city, but we're exploring for themes. So I'm going to talk about a city, we'll list some of the big movies in it, and we'll come up with some themes and see how they compare. So the first city is Boston, obviously.
Our favorite. Boston rules! New York rules!
I still had to put that in. So
yeah, I did.
Movies, just basic recent movies coming out of Boston. The Departed, The Town, Good Will Hunting, Mystic River, Spotlight, Gone Baby Gone, The Fighter, which is in Lowell, but close enough, Shutter Island, and Black Mass. So, thinking about just that brief list, we have a lot of fighting themes going on. Good Will Hunting, Matt Damon's character, Will, big fighter. He's a blue-collar
and it's
fighter.
reflecting his internal struggle with him trying not to project that and restructure his life.
And then another movie that has a lot to do with fighting, The Fighter.
Which is just fucking awesome.
Which is awesome.
Fucking Charlene. Fucking quality
But it's a
girl.
lot of like people who are persevering. Spotlight is like that. It's about the Boston Globe pushing and pushing against the status quo to take down the Catholic Church. So there's a huge element of fighting, especially as the underdog, as the blue-collar position.
It's a lot of these movies, I know it sounds silly, but I mean, it really comes back to, it goes to that gritty, blue collar. A lot of times when it comes to Boston, that Irish foundation, and it's not a racial thing, it's just a cultural thing that those movies follow that tone.
And then another thing that I'm noticing looking at these movies is we have kind of a new wave of crime. It's a new wave of modern crime. Look at The Town specifically. The Town is very modernized crime. Robbing high-end banks, robbing Fenway Park. They're using all these modern tactics. They're going undercover. It's very much based on the scheme behind the crime as much as it is a traditional power play. So it's a very modern view of crime. Gone Baby Gone does a lot of that. And then Black Mass is a little bit more in the past, but it's still very modernized when you compare it to those traditional gangster movies. The way Black Mass is portrayed is still very much a new wave of crime.
It's kind of like The Dark Knight versus regular superhero movies, where Boston's usually that darker, grittier, almost harsher toned.
I would say not so much, because The Godfather is very gritty if you think about it. So what I would say is it's more of a blockbuster feel. Does that make sense? It feels more Nolan. I think you were right with The Dark Knight, but think about The Town and Black Mass and Gone Baby Gone. Those feel like big scope movies, and everything feels larger.
It does, but it doesn't carry the weight of a blockbuster. Like, it's
but
it doesn't have that feeling of grandeur.
But when you compare it within its genre to other crime movies, The Town feels like a much bigger crime movie.
But I would also say it feels dark.
It does. It has a dark element.
It's more of a struggle.
I just think that The Godfather is pretty dark.
I feel like a blockbuster, you can have a dark story, but it's still kind of, let's click into place as we go.
Right.
Whereas, I mean, like The Town, they had some points where it's just raw.
True, but we can agree on that modern scope of crime.
It is modern,
Very
for sure.
modernized.
I just wouldn't say blockbuster.
Okay, so we'll stick to modernized and we'll agree there, because that's definitely consistent. And then the blue-collar fighting mentality, which especially in Good Will Hunting and Spotlight, definitely there.
And you really got to bring back, like, I hate to hammer this home, but the Irish feel to it, because
that's Boston's thing.
Well, I know,
Irish.
but I mean, like, even big cult films like Boondock Saints.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a huge proponent.
Very true.
And that's something that
The Departed too.
And that's
Departed
the thing.
has a ton of Irish related.
Yeah, and the city, the movies, everything kind of roots to that foundation.
True. Now, New York's interesting because sometimes it's used as simply a big city because it is our biggest city in the USA. So that brings King Kong, Rosemary's Baby, Taxi Driver, Dog Day Afternoon, The Warriors, Ghostbusters, American Psycho, Goodfellas, and the Godfather movie.
And right now, I'm going to say the best probably analogy for New York is Broadway. Because it's grandeur
Yep.
while still being traditional.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. Mix in a little bit of that big disaster, which you're getting with Ghostbusters and King Kong, where they're kind of using the city to show that immense destruction. And then you have that classic element. It's the opposite of Boston in the sense that it's very classical for gangsters especially. The Godfather doesn't get more classic.
No.
Goodfellas, even though is much more modern, is still going for that classic style of gangster.
When you watch the New York-based gangster movies, like, it almost feels classy.
It does. It's the Italian mob, you know? It's got that very specific feel to it.
I'm going to
Very
kick the shit out of you
opposite.
while wearing my fucking Armani suit.
And I think Gangs of New York, despite being set in a very kind of one specific place, kind of has an analogy to Boston versus New York. Because in Gangs of New York, you have all the Irish who are much more rugged, much more modernized in the way that they do things. And then you have the Italians who are much more into the system. They have a structure of everything. That's how movies from Boston and New York relate. It's right in Gangs of New York. You can see it. You can see the difference. That movie does a great job of showing those two cultural differences.
It does.
And where does that big Irish modernized come from? A lot of times from Boston. It moves over. Interesting. Chicago. Not quite as wide an array of movies as I thought. So Chicago comes with The Fugitive, The Untouchables, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Barbershop, Mean Girls, and Wayne's World. So much more on the lighter side of film on their big hits.
Showing!
Oh, man. But it's lifestyle. It's lifestyle. I mean, The Fugitive has that criminal touch, but Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Barbershop, Mean Girls, Wayne's World, lifestyles. It's a comedic look at everyday situations.
And even like with The Untouchables, that's a great way to segue because, I mean, you're looking at The Departed from Boston, you're looking at The Godfather from New York, and then you look at The Untouchables. It's a completely different take on a very similar storyline because, you know, The Untouchables is not completely urban based at all times. It's more free ranging, which is more identifying with Chicago, which is one of the gate cities to the west. So, I mean, it really reflects that city's attitude.
Yeah, I agree.
Plus, and it's another city that really does have a strong Italian backing, just like New York.
Yep. Yeah, I could definitely see that. But it is definitely going much less gritty. It is the absolute opposite of grit.
It is almost like, it's like where you have grit in Boston, you have tradition in New York, you almost have an abstract feel in Chicago.
Yeah, it's interesting. Here's another one. Los Angeles, Training Day, Street Kings, The Big Lebowski, Magnolia, Heat, Speed, Drive, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Die Hard. So the one common element I'm seeing with those, big shots, people who are the best at what they do. Think about it. Training Day. He is the best corrupt cop. He's he's coming off being the best, but he has a huge reputation following him. He's really violent. Everyone knows who he is. Street Kings, same thing. Forrest Whitaker and Keanu are both really high level. Whitaker's got these aspirations to be chief and then mayor. Keanu's the hitman, the dog that he releases. Drive, that guy is the best at what he does.
And what I like about them is they all kind of have that tone where they have a certain degree of laid backness. You know, everyone always talks about California easy, just kind of
no
roll
one's
with
playing by the rules in these movies.
They're not.
Even Speed, he just let's go to the airport with a bomb on the bus.
And a lot of these characters, they're not under high tension. They roll with it.
They do.
You know, Big Lebowski, he rolls with it. Training Day, he rolls with it.
True.
You look at Street Kings, he rolls with it.
That's a good point. I didn't even see
Ryan
that.
Gosling, does he ever get that upset in the movie? He's just like,
well, he did crush a dude's head in the elevator.
but he just takes that point like, shit happens. I'm going to fuck someone up.
Yeah.
It's another day.
Very interesting difference in tone there, because it's very high-strung in New York and Boston.
It is. It is.
And that's true of society. As you go west, it does generally start to feel a little more laid back when you go that direction.
Whereas when you further east, it's just all make or break.
Oh, my balls, my ass, my balls.
It's probably because we're always fucking cold.
Las Vegas, casino, showgirls, The Hangover, swingers.
Excess.
Yeah, vice, just hedonistic practice. Really not that much to say about it. It's pretty obvious.
Let's get some girls, let's get some blow, let's make a night of it.
That's pretty much Vegas. No surprises there. And then the last city we looked at was Miami. Miami has Scarface, Live by Night, Miami Vice, and There's Something About Mary. Not really sure what I'm seeing.
I don't know where that one fits in.
Hey, it's on Miami.
One of these movies ain't like the other.
Well, Miami, it's got that crime element. It's got that gangster element. It seems like it's an offshoot. It's like a mix of Boston
No, I
and New
think
York.
where it takes a very distinct difference is, Boston, it's out in the streets. I'm going to meet you outside. It's going to be gritty. It's going to be painful.
Yep.
You look at New York, it's going to be traditional. It's going to be, you talk to my family, I talk to your family, somebody's going to pay.
That was good.
And then you go, Chicago, we've gone through this. You get the point. But when you look at Miami, they're big, especially with crime movies and fight movies, it's the underworld. It's that this is the seedy underlying.
That's a good, because in Scarface we see that, Live by Night, and Miami Vice with the cops.
Because
there is quite a bit of that.
It is always, like with the Miami, the scene, it's always an emphasis that it looks like glitz and glam, like LA would, but it's the dark underbelly that their movies dive into.
Interesting. And then There's Something About Mary. They're all pretending to
well, I mean,
Mary.
you got that one dude who's like a secret stalker, and
Yeah,
then Brett Favre's like, hey, I still love you.
That's more of an outlier.
Yeah.
But so what do you guys think? I think we did touch on the general themes that these cities tend to go for. What other cities did we miss that you want to see us talk about? And are there some cities you would like compared? So for example, a specific video of New York versus Boston, we'll make it if you want it. So
we
let
can
us
talk
know.
about how dreary Seattle is, or how uneventful anything in Idaho is.
I actually, doing one on London would probably be interesting.
You almost say that Seattle and London could possibly even be comparable.
Well, do us an outro. We'll come back to that if they comment.
If you comment, maybe we'll talk about Seattle, London, Paris, Rome. Who knows? We can go anywhere with Google Maps. So share, subscribe, and who knows? And comment.
Okay.